Do you want to learn how to create a simple winter landscape in watercolor in only a few minutes? Then don't miss this video.
And I'm using this big squirrel mop brush that I didn't clean out from yesterday. You see it had a bunch of orange, brown in it. So we're wash off the brush again. Come back into here and drop just a lot of water. And I'm working on a 7 by 10 inch piece of Magnani watercolor paper, 140 pound, that is on a block, so it won't warp as much. And I'm gonna get the whole sky wet. Then I'm gonna mix up a bunch of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, which will make a really nice gray. You just gotta make sure you get an equal mixture so it looks gray. Just lean. So I'm just gonna go back and forth a little bit until I get a nice gray mixture of color mixed up. Then I'm gonna come into here and I'm gonna start dropping the color. Now this looks really dark to start with. And like watercolor, it's going to lighten up quite a bit. So I'm going to come into here and just kind of do some cloud shapes. I'm going to skip some areas of the white of the background. And you know, because we're working wet and wet, the color is going to move around and spread out quite a bit. So I don't have to get everything wet. Just a big puddle of color and water. And I'll leave some of the highlights in the sky so it starts to kind of look like clouds. But I'm trying to get kind of just a flat mixture. So it doesn't lean towards the blue side too much or the brown side. And because we're working wet and wet, we're not going to get hard edges in any of these areas. Because the paper's dry here, we're going to get a hard edge here, but not up in here. Now what I have to do is I have to let this layer dry before I can go into the next layer, because if I start painting this section while this area is all wet, all this color is going to creep in here, and I don't want that to happen, or it might creep out that direction. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this dry, and then we'll work on the second stage in just a second. Alright, now the background is mostly dry. Now you can see there's a couple of wet spots right here. I'm going to get a little bit of a blossoming effect here. I'm not too worried about that though. But what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the second area now. And what I'm going to do first is going to take the number 6 Richeson. I think it's number 6 or number 8. The handle's all worn off. And I'm come back into here and get your brush nice and wet. And I am starting to get a big blossom and back run up in this section. So I'm going to come back in here and take off some of the water just to control that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up mostly burnt sienna at this point in time. Gray it down just a little bit of blue. These are really nice colors together. This is the Winsor Newton burnt sienna and Winsor Newton French ultramarine. These guys are very granulating colors, so if you take a look at them, you can see how, if you look at this close up, it looks like there's a lot of pattern in it. That's because these are granulating colors. And if you want to work with granulating colors, you just have to get colors that granulate or add granulating medium to them. But ultramarine blue and burnt sienna are almost always granulating. They're really nice for textural effects, things that looks like rocks. I'll put a little bit of blue in this so it's not just straight burnt sienna. And I'm coming into here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start making, these are going to become our rock shapes. So there's going to be some rocks sticking out of the snow here. Beautiful thing about snow scenes is you don't even have to paint that much, because the white of the snow is the white of the watercolor paper. So come in here and do some rock shapes. Some big shapes, some smaller shapes. As things are further in the background, they're not going to be as big. Unless it's a giant rock. I'll put some shapes into here. Just try not create patterns with things. I want it to just be kind of irregular. And then I'm going right to left since I'm left-handed and I don't want to stick my hand into wet paint. But as I say that, I'm going back over into here, which I probably shouldn't do. Some smaller shapes, some bigger shapes. Put some rocks in the background here, and making my way basically right to left through this whole painting here. I'm not going to do a whole lot in there, so just some smaller rock shapes. Got some rocks that go up this direction here. While things are still wet, if you want to hit it with some color, knock back some edges, rinse the brush off, and come back in with a little bit of water, just a touch and kiss. And I'll give you some hard air edges and some soft edges. This is something I like to do a lot because, again, it creates a little bit more variety and just visual interest in a piece. And we'll do some bigger shapes back in here. And the further away things are too, you don't want to make them as dark. And that's because of atmospheric perspective. So the closer things are to you, the darker and higher contrast they're going to be. Okay, some more rock shapes here. Make that a little bit darker in the foreground. Grabbing some more color. It's just basically just straight burnt sienna. Rinse the brush off, come back in, touch some edges, let things touch and kiss. And I'm trying not to go back into the areas I painted too much. Get some different shapes, some big shapes, some small shapes. You know, just try not to create patterns with the shapes. That's the hardest part, I think. Now, most of these areas back in here are going to get covered again by blue paint for the next layer. And if you put the blue paint on top of the brown, it's going to optically look like the blue is sitting on top of it, which is what I'm looking for. So when you layer paint, it really does matter which one goes first and which one goes second. Do a little flicking down here for some details. Now I've got to let that layer completely dry 100% before I go to the next layer. Alright, so this is mostly dry now. I do have one little section that's still wet over here, but I'm not going to paint over that, so I'm not too worried about that. But don't paint over something that's wet. It's just going to lift it off and start to make mud for you. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my Squirrel mop brush, which is my number 2 Squirrel mop brush. And I'll include links to all of these in the item description underneath the YouTube video. And I'm going to grab mostly just ultramarine blue right now, so I actually do have to clean off just a section of my palette. This kills me because you're wasting paint. But clean off just a little section of it, get some pure blue, and this is going to become the shadows for our mountains here. And I'm not using a reference photograph, I'm just kind of making this up out of my head, because I think if you make things up, you can't really screw it up, and that's the theory at least. Don't prove me wrong. Alright, now I'm going to come up into here, and I'm going to start over here on this side, and I might have to switch to a smaller brush too. This is a little darker, I think, than I wanted it, but lots of color, lots of water. And you know it's going to dry lighter because it's watercolor. And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to put the shadows where the mountains are going to be. I'm going to go around some of the rocks. I'm going to go through lots of the rocks, but don't go back and forth, because if you start to do that, that's what pulls off the color and makes mud for you. And so I'm going to bring in here some shadow shapes, some darker shadows. I'm going to go around some of the sections for the rocks because they'll be poking out above the shadows. And then I'm going to put this Squirrel mop brush down here. And I'm going to grab a smaller brush. Where did my other one go? I haven't been here long enough to lose things. Oh, it's right here. Okay. And I'm going to grab more of my color here. Now I'm going to come into here. And what I want to do is I want to feather some of these edges. So I've got a brush with just clean water here. And I'm coming into here. I'm going to touch these edges and touch them, let it touch and kiss like I did earlier with the brown. Let that blue just flow back into that area there. What that's going to do is it's not going to give you as hard of an edge, because the water will creep into there. And if it's too dark up here, then take a thirsty brush. So get the brush so that it becomes drier than the paper. And what it does at that point in time is it pulls the color off as opposed to putting it down. So you can lift off a lot of the color, but we're not trying to go over the wet areas that are on top of brown, because that will pull off a lot of color. So if it's too dark, you can wick up some color. And hopefully what this starts to do is it starts to look like it's kind of three-dimensional here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the Squirrel mop brush again, really juicy, really wet, come up into here, trying not to paint into the sky. I just did a little bit there, it's not too bad though. Okay, I'm going to miss some sections of white in there. So this is a little valley down here. We're just getting some different shapes here. Switch to my smaller brush here. Watercolor is one of those things too, you just got to remember it usually looks really bad until you're done with it. Okay, soften up these edges here a little bit, rinse it off with water. Come up here, touch and kiss it. Come up into here while it's still wet, take out some of this color. Take out some of the color here if it's too dark. Lift out a little bit the color there. I did paint over into the sky there, which I didn't want to do, but I think that's okay. Well, we can fix that. I'll keep using the smaller brush right now. Mix up some more ultramarine blue, French ultramarine. Got to watch out because certain brands call it French ultramarine. They've got different names for ultramarine deep. Usually it's mostly the same thing, but again, always look at the tube of paint, the color, especially check out the color too. Don't just buy it going by the name. You can never really trust the name. You got to find out what's in the actual tube of paint itself. All right, so up in here, I'm just using the smaller brush because it's kind of hard with the big squirrel mop brush when you're painting this large to not paint into the sky too much. And I'm going to just miss some sections of white. And see, I thought this painting looked absolutely dreadful like 2 minutes ago. I think it's already starting to get a sense of 3 dimension to it. All right, so we're going to miss some spots of white. I've got this shadow coming down over into this section here. So I'm going to go back to my squirrel mop brush now because I want to cover some bigger areas using just the French ultramarine. And our little valley area is going to be over in here. It's going to go down there. I'll stop before that rock there. Just remember, when you're going over existing color, you can't go back and forth too much because that pulls it off. So just try to go back once and not mess with it. And grabbing the smaller brush again, I'm going to put some blue back behind this little rock here. Make a little bit of a shadow shape here. I'm going to throw some blue into this section because that means it's foreground. Now I think this is too diagonal right now. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab some more blues there. Right, I guess. That guy agrees with me too. I'm going to come up into here and I'm going to grab a little bit more of this blue and just bring it over here. There's like a shadow from a mountain we can't see of some sort. Just to break up the shape a little bit. Same thing here. Put some blues down into here. You know, even snow has some soft shadows on it. Come back with just clean water. Hit those edges, make them disappear a little bit. The great thing about these colors too is that they don't stain the paper. So if you want to come back later and like reactivate them, which I'm kind of doing right now, it is still partially wet. What you can do is you can get rid of the hard edges by just hitting it with some water, and that just kind of diffuses the edges for you a little bit here. And I'm going to come up into here and I'm going to do just a couple of little blue shapes here. Let's do something. Break that up a little bit. Dropping some more color here. Just try to make it so it doesn't look too patterned. All right, and let me step back and see if I like this. Yeah, I think that painting is done, so all I have to do is let this dry a little bit. If I wanted to come into here and put even some darker shapes in the foreground, I could, but I think I'm going to let it sit the way it is and let that dry, and then that will be a finished painting. So thank you very much for joining me today. Again, we're doing just 2 colors in a landscape, a simple winter landscape, and I hope you enjoy this, and take care and happy painting. If you like this content, hit subscribe. I'll have more watercolor tutorials in the future. Thanks a lot and happy painting.